Slowly it rises.
Hey, it's ODB, the Lincoln Addict, and I'm going to do this video to highlight one of the top sellers in terms of 60s Lincolns at Barrett-Jackson that actually happened today, just a short period ago. I got to give a shout out to Tom Bennett. I wasn't at the computer. He texted me some of the intel. I was out actually on a service call with my friend Tony Boss Bolin, working on a Lincoln Continental Convertible, or helping, I should say. But if you've been following this channel, you know that I cover these cars typically before and sometimes after these different auctions. And what I want to look at is this one right here. Again, Barrett-Jackson.com with the dash in between. You can go and you can see these same numbers. Something I will tell you is the only one so far that hasn't crossed the block is the 66 blue. That's fairly stock other than a set of custom wheels. You can see some of the prices here. I'll just go down. 67, kind of a stock convertible on a nice wide white wall tire that sold for just under 62. And keep in mind, these prices are with the fee, so the hammer price will be lower. Surprised at this one, 66 Continental Custom Roadster, 54 grand. So you could have bought for another not even 10,000. You could have bought a really nice 67 with a top, but, you know, to each their own. This 66 Vert with the Detroit Steel Wheel Co., also known as Mob Steel Wheels, that's airbagged, although you can't tell in these photos. That went for 90, pretty much 96. And then we still have this 66, as I mentioned. The focus right now is just going to be a topic. I'm not going to go into detail on this actual car because I did do a preview, if I recall correctly, about this 65. We know, number one, 65 is very desirable. 64, 65s kind of have their cult following. And then you have the people that really love the 1s, 2s, and 3s. But 65 certainly is desirable, all right? But this is the interesting fact that I find here. It's not always about what's done to the car that's going to drive the money. We've seen stock cars go for way more than this. We've seen custom cars go for way more than this, right? So I think a lot of these prices depend upon different things. It depends on the environment, you know, who's there. Do you get lucky sometimes, if not a lot of times? Certainly, I think you do. This car, it was well known that this car was going for a while. And here's the interesting fact about this car. I followed this one for a long time. You look at it, it's very sleek. Of course, it's a custom car. It has air suspension. But the C word, Coyote, it has a Coyote swap in it, okay? And oftentimes, when I see comments in social media, or I see comments in mostly social media, but you'll see situations where people will go, well, man, if such and such car didn't have an LS, it would have sold for a lot more. Well, let's take a look at this. Shout out to Ali. Ali did make an appearance on Lincoln Addict Podcast when we had David Escalante on. So shout out to Escalante and Suicide Kings and their whole crew. But this car, Scottsdale, so we're talking a year and a half ago, this car sells for $324,500. Okay, so you look at this car, and I think the big thing is, hey, it has a GM engine in it, right? It has an LS, has a lot of other stuff too. Definitely a resto mod. It has that custom touch, the bucket seats, if you will, and things like that. A lot of custom stuff, a lot of work went into this car. And I'm not here to judge, these cars, but what I am here to at least state as a fact is, as much as like you or I may not be a fan of putting a GM engine or even resto modding a Lincoln, a lot of guys are purists. You got guys like me that go, man, I got the Mel 430. I'm happy. Maybe one day I'll do a Coyote swap. Don't know. Don't think that's really in my immediate future. But again, to each their own. But check this out. 324, we'll call it $325K with the fee just a year and a half ago. right? This has an LS engine in it. So the whole thing, in my opinion, and based upon the facts we're looking at here, is you can't just say, oh, it has a GM. If it would have had a Coyote, or it would have had a stock engine, or it would have had a Godzilla, whatever Ford engine, this thing would have went for another $100,000. This right here proves that that's not true. Now, again, you could say, hey, it proves it right now. There's a line in the sand, sure, but it doesn't mean that in the future, like if Ali were to come back and, maybe you could argue and say, well, Jay, this car may have hit $400,000 or $375,000 if it would have had a Coyote. Hey, definitely, I could appreciate that discussion, but there's no guarantee. I think that's the big thing. And there are people that make a living off of building cars and selling them. There's no denying that. And that's a cool gig, especially if that's your thing. But something to keep in mind is that, you can't always do that with every single car. You might have a guy that takes 100 cars and maybe he loses on 20 of them, but he makes out on 80 of them, right? 80% would be a good, take rate to go, hey man, I'm 80% successful. So like these guys that are bringing two cars, or maybe they're kind of fed up with the project and they're going to punt it. They don't always win at these auctions, And again, certainly I think to me, I think $148,500 is a lot. I mean, I would be happy if I had this car. This guy, I think, has owned it a long time. I've never spoken with him. I followed him on social media. I think that, he's probably super happy. There's no denying that. And of course, I'm not taking, any negative sentiment there. But I just like to point out that if this car had an LS in it, it may have still hit the same amount. So that's something to keep in mind. Now I'm going to show you one other one. This Scottsdale 2023, Scottsdale 2022. Okay, so 2022, $324K. Of course, Ali brings this one for this year, earlier this year, and this one hits $275,000. Now, when Ali was on the podcast and he made that appearance, thanks to Escalante, kind of patching him in to that podcast episode, he talked about in the future wanting to maybe do, as the competitive nature and go, what if I do an Ali build and I do it with the same, pedigree that I've been doing, but, a different power plant? Could he make more money? Absolutely. You could also say that, well, Jay, this is the inaugural, probably going to be annual, I would think, going forward, of this Barrett-Jackson, New Orleans, right? New Orleans. And certainly that could be it, right? I mean, it's a different market. This car's from California, you've got online bidders, sure, this and that. But at the end of the day, I think just the main point is that if you have a car and you're looking at taking it to Barrett-Jackson, you can't do a reserve. There's no option for a reserve. Certainly this guy that owns this car probably is super happy. $148K, or called $150,000. That's a lot of money. I'm happy for this dude. But you can't say that the drivetrain always brings more money, because here's two examples where very nice cars, brought more money. So again, I'm not trying to insinuate anything other than, these cars are super fun. They're super popular. There's many different ways to do them. You can go stock, semi-custom, full-blown custom, full-blown resto mod, however you want to slice and dice it. You could put a lot of money in these cars, and sometimes you get a lot back on the investment. Other times, you break even. Sometimes you probably lose, but just know that the auctions don't always go the way you intend them to go. The last thing I'll say is, if you check out the latest episode of Lincoln Addict Podcast, I talk a little bit about the business model of an auction. And at the end of the day, and you can listen to the episode, I'm not going to go all into it, but their goal is to have an auction, have as many vehicles there as possible, sell as many cars. The more they sell, the bigger that pot is, the more commission they potentially make, right? Or they do make. And then, of course, with some of these auctions, like a Barrett-Jackson, like a Mecum, they get so big that now they've got a TV contract, they've got sponsors, they've got food vendors, they've got their own T-shirts. They make it this whole big thing. And that's a fantastic thing. I think it's a great marketplace. But just keep that in mind. Bring a Trailer is still one of my favorite places to look at these cars and even potentially bid on them. But maybe one day I'll get a deal with Bring a Trailer. Take care, everyone. Let me know what you think. Am I off on this? Certainly, congratulations, 150K. That's a lot of money. Happy for the guy. Let me know what you guys think. Comments and thoughts in the comments, please. Take care, everyone. We out of here.